All right. There we go. Is that you? See if anybody else goes on. I need some Muzak or something. There we go. All right. Well, I guess I'll wait for just one or two more people here. But in the meantime, I'll get myself rigged up. So this is Lake Fred out here on a really hazy day. Thankfully, the weather kind of stopped raining for us. Water is really still, and we're seeing an awful lot of birds. I think that they're enjoying the respite from human activity. I'm out here with good friend Susan Allen. She's documenting a little bit of this. So yeah, let's get the canoe in there. So I figured out from experience that it's not very wise to hold a camera and try to paddle at the same time. Lost many a good phones while fishing slash paddling. So I've got my nifty little deep cycle motor, deep cycle battery, and a nice little 40-pound thrust motor that'll get me where I need to go, assuming that there's not too many weeds, which there aren't at this time of year. We're going to go ahead and put on a life jacket to be safe, even though the average depth here is about 4 feet, so if I fall in, pretty much just have to stand up. But better be safe than sorry. Also better be legal than illegal. So I'm going to put this down here. All right, suited up. My nifty, cheap vest that is super attractive on anybody. All right, so let's get this thing rigged up on the boat. Sorry for all the jostling. We will get you. Oh, that looks great. Perfect. All right, so let's get me out on the water. Trick is, when working with technology, not to fall in. We could only hope so. I'll have to swing the camera around. Oh, if I weren't so fat. All right, all. So, I'm moving. Cool. I'm gonna get the motor in the water, and tell you what, it's going to be a real quick ride out to the islands to see if there's anything colonizing it. I'm going to describe the experiment along the way here for everybody involved. Let me get myself situated here. There we go. So, take this off so that you guys can better see the lake here. Alright, so we are out on Lake Fred right now. We are going towards some experimental islands that my ecology class, my ecological principles, Envil 2400 class, they constructed to test one of the most fundamental principles in ecology, and that is called the theory of island biogeography by Macarthur and Wilson. Now, when they did this, when they actually tested this theory, and I'll describe it in a second, they actually fumigated some islands in the Caribbean, and there's some great videos online if you just search for theory of island biogeography. Oh, saw a fish jump. So they fumigated some islands to actually create their islands. We didn't do that. We man-made islands and whatnot. So the theory is very simply that islands that are closer to the mainland, which would be the ones that are colonized most quickly and with the most number of species. And islands that are far from the mainland would be colonized by the fewest number of species and the least amount of those species. And also further away are going to experience faster rates of extinction of those species than islands that are closer to the mainland, because they're constantly replenished by new species. So this theory has been shown to give correct predictions in many, many circumstances, and it's not just on islands in the middle of a lake. You know, we're used to thinking about islands as being islands like I don't know, that thing right there, or just, and you know, like the Caribbean islands, really large islands. But actually, islands can be anything that is surrounded by inhospitable areas. So how do species get to an area that is surrounded by inhospitable islands? You can think of like a castle with a moat surrounding it is kind of like an island. And so while we're working in a freshwater lake, we also have an experiment set up where we have little vernal wetlands. And how do frogs get to those vernal wetlands when they're surrounded by a whole bunch of land with snakes and birds and other stuff that wants to eat them? So inhospitable area. So the theory of island biogeography, although it's called islands and it's originally tested in marine system, it can apply to both freshwater system. It can also apply to mountaintops. How do birds get to mountaintops when it's surrounded by a whole bunch of inhospitable territory? It can be, oh, there's a blue jay. So we are heading out right now. You can see that little white thing off in the distance. That is our closest island. I'm going to pan around here. That's our closest island. And so we had to have islands that are different distances from the mainland. So you can see another island right there, and there's going to be a couple more islands out there. So what we're doing today is just checking to see if these islands have been colonized. Now, it's an interesting question. What can colonize islands like this, and how do they get colonized? Well, if we think about what can possibly colonize islands out on the middle of a lake, well, first of all, I mean, fish aren't going to be the ones to colonize islands, but birds will fly to these islands, and maybe they'll, take a small little poop with a seed in it, and that seed will land in the soil that we've placed on these islands, and that seed will germinate. We can also expect some dandelions to show up because dandelions are wind pollinated. Hang on one second, guys. I got to put this down so that I can migrate my way to the... Oh, I'm not a videographer. To those of you that are just showing up, I am visiting some islands in the middle of Lake Fred that my ecology class created to test the theory of island biogeography. And I will show you the construction of these islands in just a second as I get closer to them. All right, so here is one of the islands, and what we've done is we have pool noodles. We have pool noodles on the bottom to help them float. We have plastic tarp laid out across those pool noodles and zip tied. Somebody named this island Avalon, one of the students did. And then we have plastic tarp on the inside. The pool noodles are keeping everything afloat. And then we put in didn't have any seeds in it, and just let the soil kind of sit in this island for a while. Now you can see the soil is pretty damp. It's got all these little white perlites in them, which is just part of the soil mixture. And then the entire island is anchored to the bottom of Lake Fred with some cinder blocks and rope. So what we're looking for right now is any evidence that there are seeds or insects in these islands, and right now, just off the top, I'm not seeing anything, although it is interesting. We are getting some pine needles in here, which, it's interesting to think about what actually blows out to these islands. I didn't put these pine needles here, which means that trees from around, from the mainland, somehow these pine needles got in here and they made it over top of this corrugated plastic siding. Well, these pine needles are important because these pine needles are what accumulates on islands and eventually starts to decompose and make soil. So these pine needles, the fact that these pine needles are here, it shows a little bit of that theory of island biogeography, just because it shows how islands can start to accumulate humic material. Now, this island is relatively close to shore, so that's one of the reasons why we're seeing pine needles here. And if we go out to the islands farther away, then we won't see any. We probably won't see any pine needles. Now, we had plastic tarp and we put soil on here just to kind of jumpstart the island. But you can also imagine a freshwater island as being sort of the result of a rock outcropping that starts to accumulate these kind of pine needles. And yeah, Steve Johnson, I hear you, but I'm on Lake Fred. You should come on over here and join me on the canoe. We'll keep 6 feet apart. So, by the way, if anybody has any comments or questions while I'm talking, please do just send them in. I'm staring at the comment section and I'll answer them one by one. So right now I'm not seeing any evidence of humic material or kind of stuff on here, seeds or anything. Although last time I was out here about a week and a half ago, I did see a dandelion seed out here, which is really cool. I just don't think it is growing. We might come out here. I think I'm going to leave these up all summer long. Ecology takes time to show some results. I think I'm going to leave these things out here all summer long, and maybe we'll put in some fresh soil. I might also try to make these things float a little bit more. Sorry if this was already answered already. Michelle Hatfield asks, but how did you determine the size of the islands? Well, all the islands are 2 feet, well, roughly 2 feet by 2 feet, because that's what we made them out to be. That was just a class decision. How can we do it? And actually, it was kind of the result of the size of the pool noodle, so we could not waste as much material. But the islands could be bigger or smaller, and that's another essential component of the theory of island biogeography. Is large islands are likely to be colonized faster than smaller islands. Of course, that also is kind of intuitive. Larger islands are going to receive more species flying in than smaller islands are. So larger islands that are closer to the mainland are most likely to see the most amount of colonization than islands that are farther away from the mainland and smaller. It's actually fun if any teachers are chiming in here. I do this exercise with my class every semester where I have them arrange themselves in different sized islands in a classroom, and then I populate their islands at random by throwing handfuls of Starburst candies, which are the different species, at them. It's a lot of fun. No one's gotten injured yet. So we have Susan all the way on shore right there. You can wave hi, Susan. And now we're just moving out to the next island over here. I'm going to speed up the motor a little bit. One of the awful things about working with a motor in Lake Fred is that there's enough vegetation, mostly these lilies that are coming up, where the motor is already clogged with vegetation. No problem at all, just a 40-pound motor. All right, so now we're nearing in on the next one. Put this thing down. This island, the students named Whatever Island. So maybe some apathetic students. Sorry if any of them are watching. Oh, I've passed it. Gonna have to put the phone down. Looks like we've got a few more people coming in. Great to have you on. If any of you have any interesting questions or non-interesting questions, you're more than welcome to ask them. So what we're doing is we're checking out islands that we've made on Lake Fred. My ecology, my environmental science 2400 class made them out on Lake Fred, just to test this fundamental principle of island biogeography that looks to see how islands are colonized. Now it looks like a lot of the soil has kind of drained out of this. There are holes in the tarp to allow rainwater to drain, but it looks like it is draining a little bit too much. We are getting some algae growing on this, which is fun. You can see, maybe, I don't know, see kind of that it's greenish. Hi, Diana. Thanks for chiming in. Yeah, I'm not seeing any seeds in here. That's why I'm kind of disrupting the soil. Like I said, I think maybe I'll come out here and try to float these things a little bit more and maybe put some more soil in, adjust the design of these things to make them a little bit more sturdy. But they've been out here for about a month and a half now. We created these before the pandemic episode kicked in, so they've been out here for a while, and you can actually see, if you take a look at the pool noodles here, you can actually see all those little tiny lines on those pool noodles. Those are little midges that have made their homes on them, so those are the cases for the midges. Probably not in there right now. Anyway, so these have been out here for a while, and it's really great that they have survived for this long. Of course, it's also been really cold and there's not a whole lot of stuff growing, period. So, I mean, it could just be that we're not catching this at the right time of year. The But yeah, so I think, with any ecology experiment, with any bit of science, the trick is always to start with some initial design and then go from there. You never really get started until you try. This is interesting. I know that you guys can't see it. There's actually a spider web on here. I didn't put spiders on here, so that is incredibly interesting, actually. How did a spider get here? Well, some spiders can actually float on the wind, and they can drift with those wind drifts, or they can travel on birds. You can think about the really small spiders that can travel on birds. So it is possible that the spider came here that way. Anyways, let's head on to the next one. Turns out that if you put a 40-pound thrust motor, so we got Cheryl Von Jones on here. I see her face. Hi, Cheryl. Good to see you. It's been a while. Turns out when you put a 40-pound thrust motor onto a small little canoe, you can go pretty fast. Highly recommend it. All right. Try to catch this. Now, we are at the third island right now and not seeing anything. So if I didn't see anything on that first island, I'm really not going to expect to see anything on islands 2 through 5. But it's nice to be out here and check them out. Still not seeing anything. So let's go on to the next one. A lot of birds out here today. You see all these birds skimming the surface? It's great. So these birds are looking for food. They're looking for any insects that they can find. Oh, I'm going to pass it. I'm going to ram it. Oh, no. Oh, no. It's okay. Oh, come here, island. Come here. Nope. Maybe I'll plant some stuff in here. I don't know, it's a nice isolated garden. I mean, it would defeat the purpose of the experiment, but whatever. All right, next one, and then this is the last one. Really don't think we're going to find anything, but you never know. So as I said, these birds are looking for food. They're skimming the surface for all kinds of insects. This island is called Island McFloatface. Wonderful name for an island. Thank you to the students who named it. Oh, come here. I caught you. Yeah, so really a lot of the soil is drained out. You see how it's mostly white. That's all that perlite material that is in potting soil, and it's much more buoyant than everything else. And so that's the stuff that's kind of stayed in here while all of the soil is drained out. So I'm going to have to come out here and put some more soil in. All right, well, that ends the tour of these islands. So while I'm out on Lake Fred and I've invested all of this energy in getting a motor onto the boat, as you can see, it's my motor, I'll take any requests on where to go. If anybody wants to just take a virtual ride in Lake Fred, I'm more than happy to just kind of tool about here. Just chime in on the chat box. No, Diane, I haven't seen any sliders. It's really kind of misty out. We're going to go to that area right now. I'm heading over to that area where I know there are, where I was thinking about, just to see if I can find any. There's some really big ones in this lake, like huge. I'm talking about double the size of my head. I've pulled them out. Know any spots with sundew? Absolutely, Greg. Hey, thanks for asking, Greg. Any spots with sundew? Not on Lake Fred, but if you were to go out to the dark path, there are some very cool places where you can find 3 different species of sundew. The only reason I know that is thanks to one of my very talented students, Josh Alcoba, who has helped me identify all 3 species. You have Intermedia, Filiformis, and spatulatum or spatulatum, I can't remember. In any case, so sundews, if you're not familiar, are carnivorous plants, and one of the unique and wonderful things about the Pine Barrens is that we have several different species of carnivorous plants, a couple different species of pitcher plants, purpurea, and then a few different species of sundews. And these are really cool plants because they catch insects from the atmosphere, digest them, and fertilize the soil with them because the plants are digesting them. Oh, I'm gonna have to put the phone down because my motor is all kinds of clogged. So ask any questions that I can answer. Just call me the resident ecologist today. Oh, my phone dropped. That's not good. I lost everybody. Hi, everybody. Everybody's back. Sorry. Might have to just paddle. God forbid I should do some physical exercise. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to paddle. No big deal. No big deal. Hey, Alice, seen any frogs today? No, no frogs today. No frogs. Can't say I have. It's a shame. Maybe next week for my Friday live podcast series for our Stockton Maple Grant that I did earlier today. Maybe I will do a vernal pond one while we look for some red maples, and I'll get myself some waders and a net and see if we can't find any frogs. Talk a little bit about vernal pond ecology. I guess you guys aren't seeing the boat. I gotta change that, don't I? Alright, I'm really taking fate into my hands right here. I'm going to put the phone on the side of the boat here. Don't worry, I've got a little stand and a clamp, so, you know, if all of a sudden it cuts out, it probably means that I just electrocuted the lake. Cool. There we go. Alright. Trying to paddle and not get the phone wet. That's a challenge. So Susan, I know if you're watching, you're probably standing by shore. You know, just send a chat if you need me to come back to shore for any reason here. I'll be sure to get back to shore for you. Otherwise, I'm just going to take a little bit of a joyride. Figured out I'm not actually going anywhere because my motor is stuck in the soil. So yeah, that's not good. So Lake Fred, I don't know if anybody knows, Lake Fred is a man-made lake. It's the result of two streams that intersect, and it was flooded to create a dam to run a mill, and then later on it was a cranberry bog, like many other lakes in New Jersey. Controlling the water level allows people to raise cranberries, and the acidity of the water is perfect for growing cranberries. And so the lake is actually pretty shallow, really not too deep at all. Maximum of about 6 feet, and for the most part, that's like really kind of exceptionally deep. For the most part, it's about 4 feet deep. So if I tell my students, you know, I'm wearing a life vest out here, but honestly, if you fall overboard, just stand up. It won't be too bad. Worst thing that'll happen is you'll have to drive home with wet clothes. So for Diana, let's see if we can't find any turtles. Like I said, I'll take any requests about where to go. If anybody wants me to paddle to a particular spot on Lake Fred because you miss it that much, I will be happy to oblige. So I usually see turtles around the spillway here, but I'm not seeing any heads poking up. So most people don't know that Lake Fred is actually dammed in two places. We're headed to the Dark Path spillway right now, which if I turn the boat, see. So there's the Dark Path spillway right there. Alex says I miss my islands. Well, I miss all my students. Most of them. Some of them I could do without. One of them's named Alex. So no turtles. I do see some plastic bottles, which is always wonderful to see. Just kidding. You don't know. Oh, hey, there's Susan. If you don't know, there's another part of my research that I do. You know, one of my research components is Stockton maple syrup production and maple syrup production throughout New Jersey. But I also study microplastic contamination in freshwater systems, and I did a large survey that I'm currently working on analyzing the results for of microplastics all throughout Jersey. Oh, that's a bird. Greg says, seen any otters recently? It's been a few years since I've seen one in Lake Fred. I haven't seen any otters in Lake Fred. I think I actually saw an otter last summer on Lake Ham. But not in Lake Fred. They are a bit difficult to see. They're kind of the large charismatic megafauna. I had no idea otters were even in New Jersey. What the heck? Yes, they are, Diana. Get my good side, Susan. So we're right past. We're still right past the path, and Susan is hanging out by the shoreline. So Lake Fred is so shallow that I'll tell you this: when I was out with my wonderful freshwater ecology class last semester, basically we found out that there's a net drift towards the bottom spillway, which of course makes sense, but I didn't account for, and we didn't have any anchors, so we were all drifting down there. So I just we didn't have any anchors, so I just hopped out of the boat and stood in the water in my jeans and just held everybody's boats in place. It was a lot of fun. Lost a really good pair of Tivas. So I'll show you one really cool thing here. I always find this kind of fascinating. Take a look at this tree right here. This tree is definitely still alive, but it has super exploited this shoreline, grown roots at this horizontal angle here. It's a cedar tree, grown, cedar, juniper. Anyways, grown roots in into the lake itself, and this tree right now definitely provides so much habitat for a lot of fish. It's one of the reasons why hardening a shoreline is really actually no good. And what I mean by hardening a shoreline is if you go to a lake and you see kind of concrete sides on the shore, that's shoreline hardening. Well, that's not good habitat for fish. We would much rather have those kinds of natural trees. So right now I'm on the north part of Lake Fred, just right on Stockton's beautiful campus. This is the, well, actually this is Lake Fred, but it's the north side of the south side of Lake Fred. There's two sides of Lake Fred, one beyond the Dark Path and the other one after the Dark Path. This one is definitely the deeper end. The one up top is more shallow, a bit mucky, and it's actually a lot of fun. I hiked through it in waders the other day. That was kind of a blast. So in this lake, we're also going to find, eventually, we're going to start seeing a bunch of carnivorous bladderworts coming up. Bladderworts are super cool. They are, like I said, carnivorous. They're submerged aquatic plants, and they have these tiny little black bladders on them that open and close whenever there's hairs that are triggered. And whenever the bladders open, they suck in zooplankton, so the little plankton that eat the algae in the water. They keep the water clean. They eat all of that plankton. So the bladderwort eats that zooplankton, and it's really fast. If you just Google or YouTube bladderwort, you should find some really cool up-close pictures of them sucking in the zooplankton. So I'm going to turn the motor on here. Looks like Lester chimed in. I'm going to turn the motor on here. Yes, for those of you that are just now logging in, I did rig a motor to a canoe. Going pretty fast. Mostly because I'm lazy. There's a great egret. Oh, well, I can't get to the other side of the path, huh, Susan? I was hoping to see a great egret now. The trick with mounting although now that I realize this, hold on, Amanda, I will answer your question in a second. Now that I realize this canoe will feature, and I am backwards in it, there's a place to mount my stupid motor, and I didn't even know it. Susan, you should have told me. Amanda asks, when do bladderworts flower? I have no idea. I mean, I definitely see them flowering in July and August. I don't know when they start flowering. They definitely don't have a period. Depending upon the species, and I think there's 3 different species. One of them is invasive around here. Depending upon the species, bladderworts will have white or I think purple flowers. And they're very small and they come up above the surface. In fact, a lot of aquatic vegetation sends flowers above the surface because pollination is near impossible underwater if you're a plant. So, yep, let me get the motor going here. All right, so again, I'll take any requests as to where to go. Oh, just hit a rock. Take any requests on where to go. If anybody has any questions, you can always ask them. Oh. I hit rock. I hit rock. Yeah. Somebody needs to increase the depth of Lake Fred here. That would be nice. Whoever's in charge of Earth. So if anybody's watching this and you've never been out on Lake Fred, I highly encourage it. There's plenty of places to just put in your canoe or kayak and, keep safe, stay 6 feet away from other people. In fact, you know what? Do yourself one better and stay like, I don't know, a mile away from people and just be the only person out on the lake like I am. Coming up on our bird flock here. A lot of terns, all just skimming around for mosquitoes. Really beautiful birds. Seem to mind that I'm out here either. So there's one island, say bye to it. That's believe that's Island McIsland Face, or whatever you guys named it. So those of you who joined late and are curious as to what the heck I'm doing out here, just on the way back. So those islands that you're seeing out in the view right now, those islands are an experiment that my Introduction to Ecology class, my Ecological Principles class, Envil 2400 did, where we were testing the theory of island biogeography, which is a theory created by Robert Macarthur and E.O. Wilson back in the 1960s or 70s, that explores and creates predictions about how islands are colonized on a lake. So basically, islands that are larger and closer to the source population or mainland are going to be colonized faster and with more species than islands which are farther away and smaller from the mainland. And so we created islands on the middle of Lake Fred and anchored them to the bottom with some cinder blocks to test this out. We're not seeing anything, but you know, ecology takes time, and we don't always get results from ecology experiments, but they're a lot of fun to do. That's why I do this. So one thing I wanted to do before we finish up here is explore the actual island in Lake Fred, on which we are hearing some geese right now. I'm going to turn off the motor here because I think we're getting to some really shallow area. So those geese are kind of pissed that I'm hanging around here right now. They might have a nest. I don't know when their breeding time is. So anyway, here, let me do this. So this is a natural island on Lake Fred, not connected by shore, although it's really shallow and you could easily wade out to it. Looks like people fish from it because I definitely see some chairs and a bucket on there. But so this island, it's interesting, when this place was flooded, this must have been a very high part of land, but you can see that the trees are thriving on it, which means that there are some really interesting species on here that thrive in kind of a high disturbance area. You're going to get some flooding. They also don't have a whole lot of land, and so there's probably a lot of competition on this island. I don't see a good place to put a boat, though, so might have to get out. There are lots of goslings around, says Greg. Yeah. Taking poops everywhere. Oh, there was a fish. Another thing that we're going to start to see here pretty soon are a whole bunch of bluegill nests. And I heard that right. If you're not familiar, bluegill, the fish, they make these nests in the water. The males do, and they dig out an area and they protect it. It's their little bachelor pad, and they protect it. And when a female comes in, they mate with that female, and then the female gets on out, and the male. Yeah, I'm not seeing a good place to put in. Oh, look at those flowers. If anybody knows what species this is, I'd love to know. I'm not sure. A bunch of flowers coming out now. Oh, some blueberries. Oh, I see blueberries. I gotta get the blueberries. Huh. You know what? It looks like somebody actually must have... I wonder if somebody actually did create this island. Let me stop waving the camera around here. I wonder if somebody did create this island, because it does look like this island, it's been fortified. So that's interesting. I wonder if either somebody chose to fortify it.